Missy Perry. I'm the education chair on the Mothers Club. I've been kind of doing this in and out for a while. And we are going to start this morning, before I do a welcome, with Father Jendal, starting us off with a morning prayer.
Oh, prayer's not really my thing.
Okay, well, I'll take it over. I can encourage you.
Oh, well, thank you, mothers, for just everything. You know, one of the things that I always try to remind parents is that you are the primary educators of your sons in the faith. You know, we do a lot that we can, certainly, of the data and things like that, but your witness, your example at home of sharing the faith with your sons is so much more vital than even our role. So continue that, and please do know, and this is with all seriousness, every single morning I light a candle for the parents of our students. After being here 7 years, I thought maybe I should light the entire wall. But every single morning we're praying for you, for your parents, because you do have such an important role, and it is awesome. It is awesome. So, yeah. Well, let's begin with prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord God, we thank you so very much for just the gift of life and the gift of love. You are so wonderful as to share your love with us and being willing to even sacrifice your Son for us. It expresses your love for us, and we just ask as well that you help that love to permeate into our hearts so that we might share it with others. In a very special way, we ask you to bless all the boys here at this school. May they continue to grow in wisdom. May they continue to grow in hope. May they continue to grow in charity. Please bless their parents as well. May they be good teachers of their sons in the ways of faith. May they as well, their sons, be open to everything that their parents have to share with them. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. And together let us ask Mary to pray for us as we pray. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, moms.
So welcome to the first Mothers Club official meeting. We're trying this 8 o'clock time to see if it works better. And you know, it's a start, right? We'll try it again and try it again. I need to get a thermometer check of how everybody's doing this morning. Scale of 1 to 10, how your morning went. 1, it was awful, it was terrible, you were tempted to swear. You were just throwing stuff. 10 being it was so smooth, your sons did everything they were supposed to do. In fact, they were pressing their pants. So everybody just yell out between scale 1 to 10 how your morning went. 1, 2, 3,
5.
8. Oh. I heard some 8 and 9s. Tell us the good news.
We all got out of the house.
That's such a high standard.
That is a high standard. Yes, that is a high standard. We have a great lineup this morning. I started with that because I do want this to be interactive. We have 3 fabulous new administrators. Not all new to the school, because Eric's been here. Mr. Rome has been here for a while. But Brian Edel will try to come down if he can. He had some other things going. If not, Mr. Rome, Mr. Edel, one person.
Yes.
He will do it.
I will consume him. There are 2 people in there.
So the lineup, the way we're going to do this is have the rows between the 2 thorns. So we'll start with Bob. We'll go with and then Mr. Rome. They are each going to talk about, as there are new positions at the school and there's been some restructuring, their roles and responsibilities, kind of what would parents come to them for, where would they be a resource, and then also their view of educating young men, period, overall, and then what's unique about doing that at STA, kind of their philosophy.
That sounds so nice and professional, and I'm not going to talk about any of that. I am so old and have been around here so long that I'm not sure this is a new role or just a different role for me. For those of you that don't know, I had been here for a very long time, starting as a student, and then I became a coach and a teacher and an administrator, and then I left here, and then I came back this summer. And it's all a very boring, winding story. But the gist of it is that St. Thomas has always been a very big part of my life and my family's life. I was the oldest of 4 boys that went here. And I really missed being here. In the 13 years I was away, I was working with a younger brother in a small private business. I'm not a business guy. I don't enjoy it. It doesn't appeal to me. I'm not good at it. 1,000 reasons why it wasn't a good fit for me. So I really look forward to coming back. And last year, as I started talking to Matt Mose and some other people, there became a need in the athletic department, and I've always been involved in athletics and non-sports activities, so it was kind of a natural fit. So I leapt at the chance to come back here. What have I discovered upon my return? I've been here since June 1st. Now picture this, if you will. I know you can't because most of you are the age of my daughter and my other kids. When I left here, I was in my young 40s, and the people who sent their kids here were former classmates of mine and friends. And as I returned, the people who are sitting here are former players and students of mine. So it's a weird shift, and it's hard to explain it, but it creates a dynamic that's soothing, reassuring, supportive, very enjoyable. At all the public events I've been at, to see that I really enjoy meeting the parents because so many of them are former students of mine. And it's really funny to watch the sons and what part of their father's traits are. When you're having a bad day at home, call me and I'll share some of the stories I have with my husband. But my role here, formally I'm known as the Director of Activities and Athletics. If you want anything to get solved, don't call me. I'm too old and too out of the loop. You can call some of the young guns here that are up in the main office. They can get things done for you real quickly. Basically what I do is I supervise all of our activities outside of the classroom, and that includes all of our sports at all levels and all of our activities. Mock trial, EVT, band, you name it. I'm there watching, and when I say supervise, part of it is doing some mentoring of our coaches and moderators, and most of them don't need a lot of mentoring. They're really good at what they do. They know far more about their activity or sport than I know about it. I have a particular passion for sports. I coached for a very long time. I think I know what makes a good teacher and what makes for probably not such a good teacher. And coaching is just an extension of the classroom in my mind. I really believe whether you're talking about our yearbook, our student newspaper, our mock trial team, our football team, or our soccer team, those are just different types of classrooms. And the same things you want a good teacher to display, you want a good coach to display. You want to have goals, you want to have different ways of teaching, a different pedagogy, if you will. You want to be able to reassess where you're going, how you're doing, evaluate if your kids are getting it. And if you have to readdress some things, you have to be able to do that. And by and large, you have to have some passion, and you have to be able to motivate kids to do well. So as I observe people doing their craft, I talk to them, have over a cup of coffee, we talk in the hall. I'm not a big rules guy, so show me the 10 things you're going to do on Tuesday to accomplish this goal. My experience is that when we hire people here, they know what they're doing. They're pretty quality professionals. And if there's a slip up or something, we can talk about it behind the scenes, and it doesn't have to become a public crisis, and then we move forward. The second aspect of mentoring is helping people develop a first-class program, whether you're coaching the 7th grade basketball team or whether you're doing the middle school math team. If you don't want your program to be the best, then you're probably not the best person to have that. We want to have high aspirations, because that's what I think our kids deserve. We may not get there, but we're going to shoot for being the best. My interaction with the kids is very informal, if you will. I would say there's not much of a formal network as far as me interacting with the boys. I'm a very loud, boisterous, obnoxious person. I make my presence known pretty easily. So whether you didn't have to agree that fast.
Vigorously agreeing.
You did not have to agree
I
that
am
fast.
vigorously agreeing with you. Silently, but vigorously.
So I talk to kids in the halls, I talk to kids in the lunchroom, I talk to kids on the practice field. Sometimes there's some sarcasm, sometimes there's those heartfelt moments where we talk about his effort and attitude, and maybe some other things that are going on. But I would say my relationship with the boys is more of an informal one as opposed to a more formal role that a teacher, a coach, a moderator would have. One of the things I enjoy about being so much older than my colleagues is I've seen a lot of different things happen here. In the 25 years I've been employed here, there's been a lot of different things that I've been a part of. And so that sort of experience, it gives you a certain serenity, maybe I like to think a little bit of wisdom. We don't have to panic at the first sign of trouble. We can work through it a little bit. I've really enjoyed talking with the few families I've talked to try to overcome some hurdles. There haven't been many. It's been a very smooth start to the year. And one of the things I really look forward to is getting to know everybody on a more personal level. When I worked here before, I took a lot of pride in the fact that I knew everybody. I mean, I knew something about, hi Julie, how are you? Nice to see you. But that's important in a school like St. Thomas. We're a school of relationships. You can go to any school you want to teach your son math or history or science. There's got to be something more important here, and I like to think it's the relationships we create. I'm going to take a risk here. So Missy wanted me to share my philosophy in working with boys with you. I'm not sure everybody's always ready for my philosophies because they're a little out there, but this is a metaphor, if you will. How many times have you thought as a mom, gosh, I just don't know how to get through to my son? And if they would have told me that in the 80s or 90s or early 2000s, I would have said, but Paula, you're looking at it the wrong way. Don't try to get through to your son. You have to look at your son as a Labrador puppy until he's 19 years old. You need to show him where to eat, where to sleep, and where to do his business. You can ask him about feelings and logical things when he turns 19, when he learns how to communicate with human beings. But for now, just make sure he's safe and love him, all right? And that's kind of my philosophy with boys. They are so transparent. They are so easy to deal with. If you just keep the expectations where they need to be, they are not going to wow you with philosophy. They are not going to be terribly vulnerable to you. They will give you little signs. Maybe preparing food and they, Mom, can I help you with the dishwasher? I'll put the dishes away. Or that may happen once a month, but that's a signal. That's when he wants to talk. You got about 13 seconds to respond to that, right? Then he's going to shut down again. God love your sons, but we are limited as males, all right? It takes us a while to get to an openness of communication. So that essentially is my philosophy, is that teenage boys are like Labrador puppies. Love them, but be really specific and keep your expectations simple for them in communicating, all right? We good? You're still awake. I want to get out of here before you fall asleep, so.
No, I worked with Bob years ago, so Q&A at the end though, can you stay?
Q&A. Sure, what time is the end? Because I got to go make a phone call.
The end is around 9 o'clock. Would you like to
I will
make
be
a phone
back.
call? Thank you.
I will be back.
Okay.
Oh, the rose is going now, though. I don't mind missing the other thorn, but I'll stay for the rose.
And this is how no one greeted us. I am Michelle Machtel, and my role here is the Director of Academic Life. I had started here in July, but I was really part of this community 11 years ago when I started working on visitation, and I got to know so many families between both schools and faculty and staff. It's been a second family to me, this community, and I think that is what makes the community so special. All of you here, all of the faculty and staff, and the students working together, building those relationships, as Mr. Slater said. When I started talking with Matt Mose about this role, my first question was, well, what exactly do you envision for the role of Director of Academic Life? And at that time it was, well, what's the title? Dean of Academics, Director of Academics, what does that mean? And so it was a really exciting time to help build a role, expand a role into something that would be meaningful for the boys and the families as well as the school as an institution. And it has been exciting. It's been very busy, and we have been going nonstop, but we are headed in such a great direction, and the boys have brought such a great energy to the hallways. But my role is three parts, really. So I work with program and curricular program, all of the looking from grades 7 through 12 and the trajectory within each discipline, and looking at how the progression from year to year, as well as the collaboration and the interdisciplinary connections between the disciplines. So what can we do to make the learning environment just robust, and how can we ensure that we're providing the best program for your boys. That is first and foremost what we want to do. We want to make sure that we are giving them relevant, meaningful learning experiences, that they are growing. A little bit of my personal philosophy with that is that I believe that all students, boys especially, need to be engaged, and there needs to be new learning so that they're challenged and that they have friends. And that social, that connectivity piece is huge. And that's with adults in the building, that's with their peers, that's with their coaches, that's with their families. And so really when we build a program and we're looking at the program, it's all of those pieces coming together. In addition, I work with the faculty and staff along with Mr. Edel, so we are making sure that our faculty and staff have the resources they need, the support they need, professional development opportunities so that they're able to deliver the program that we envision, so that they are able to work with your boys and really understand and get to know, every boy as an individual, and then look to see collectively what's needed for the school as a whole. And it's a daunting task at times. Education changes, things go full circle, but really we need to look at what do our students need? What does your boy need? And there's not one size fits all to learning. And so what can we do to modify things, to differentiate, to make sure that we're really sparking the interest of your sons? Not all boys are interested in the same things. They are really still concerned about what their peers think, even though there are no girls in the classrooms, or few, depending on if they're in a joint class with some of the girls from visitation. Their peers matter, and so we want to make sure that they feel safe, that they can take risks, and that they can challenge themselves, and that there's that appropriate level of rigor where they are still having those new learning experiences. That brings me to the third part, is where I get to work with your sons, and it has been wonderful working with individuals on course selection. And so if there needs to be a course, if they're thinking that they're not challenged enough and they need some additional rigor, they'll come and they'll meet with me, and we'll talk about some options for really bumping up the rigor. What are some course options for you? We work in conjunction with college counseling and the learning specialists, as well as the other faculty and staff within the departments, but I really am there to really help your sons figure out what's the best plan for their coursework. In addition, sometimes they're feeling overwhelmed and they're stressed that it is not, they maybe took on too much in a particular course. And so I'll work with them to look at their overall course load, what their co-curricular and activities after school might be, how they're doing emotionally, socially, if there's just so much on their plate with their family right now, what can they handle? And then we really work together to get that best plan in place. It's been wonderful because some of the boys I know, I may have known them when they were, in 4th grade, and now, they're much taller than me, and they come to my office and they're like, Ms. Mechtel, I think I need to drop this class. It's just too hard. And I'll say, really? I'm looking at your course load, and I know you, and I don't think that's a good idea. Have you talked to your parents about that? And no, and the beet red. And, well, your parents will agree with me. You can do this honors geometry course, for example, and but sometimes they need that reassurance. Okay, I thought I'd ask you first. I'm like, okay. I'm like, go home and talk to your parents. If it really is something that you are still mulling over and your family agrees that there's just so much going on, then bring this form back to me. And 9 times out of 10, they'll stop back and say, yeah, this is, you were right. My parents agreed with you. Or I'll work with parents directly who will call me and just say, what do you think about this? Could you get me in touch with the learning specialist, or could you double check with college counseling on this? My son wants to drop Spanish 4. He's fulfilled his language requirements. This has happened a lot this year. And so what are his options? What could he take in place? And so we really have a conversation of what does that look like to the colleges that you want to apply to? What does that look like for your day here at St. Thomas? What would you take in lieu of that? Because a lot of the boys this year, well, I'll take a study hall. Well, why? Why do you think you need a study hall? Because sometimes they're just really, maybe their course load is so intense that we just need to get to that. Maybe they really wanted to be with a buddy who happens to be off that period in a study hall for some unrelated issue. So we really work through that, and that part about developing relationships is essential. And so that connectiveness, like I need to get to know each of these boys. I want to work with their teachers, and I will never work in a silo. It is very important that we are communicating with one another so that we can make the best decisions with your sons for their futures. But it has been wonderful. We talk a lot about flex, and that flex time is used here for advisory, which is something new to St. Thomas. It again was developed so that your boys have one one additional connection with an adult in the building who isn't tied to their grade in a particular course, and that's very important. Those relationships, and boys will do well if you hold high expectations for them and they trust you. You have a relationship with them, you're honest with them. They want that sense of fairness, and they want to know that you truly have their best interests in mind, and it needs to be authentic. They can see through it in a second. And so as we work with the boys, and I work with the teachers and these advisors, it's really, we're building a program here, and it will be in 4 years. Those of you who have freshmen, by senior year, we're really, really hopeful and sure, we're confident that it's going to be such another good relationship for your boys that they will go. And even now we're seeing, I was talking to Mrs. Hanson, Cheryl Hanson, the Spanish teacher, on my way down here, and we were touching base about one boy who really is new to the school, ninth grader, was really nervous, didn't know a lot of folks here at all. And Cheryl and he connected during that advisory period, and Cheryl connected with his mom as well, and it's just such a nice, she doesn't have him for class now, but yet she is his kind of go-to person for if his locker is stuck and where should he go, or if he needs to say, he wants to be more organized, and how can she help him with that. So it's been a wonderful opportunity. I also work with the schedule. So we launched the new schedule. It's been, it was a little bit like Groundhog's Day when I got here in July. We had worked on the schedule of visitation from January to March, April, around there, and then we worked on the schedule here again in over the summer, but a little bit different for the flex times. But overall, the rotation is the same as were the class, the layout of the classes. And with that advisory time, there are times during the month where there's a full advisory where they're meeting with their advisor, a partial advisory where they have some formal and then some downtime within that class, and then open advisories where they have that study time and that availability of tutoring for teachers. And that's why when I would work with a student about, and they say, I need a study hall, we would really talk through that about, well, where are you feeling the need and what do you need? Because flex time, there's ample time for study during flex. And some of your sons, particularly if they're in the fine arts cohort, so band, orchestra, choir, there's less because marching for military as well as the fine arts cohort, that does once a week take up a flex time, but there should be 3 times a week where they are, for high school, have an open advisory time so that they can go and seek out tutoring from their teachers, have some downtime to really dig in and work collaboratively with others on projects as well as on their individual work. So if you're noticing that, there's just this overload of homework at home and it's not due to the co-curriculars or anything that's going on with their family, something seems off, call me. I can, if I can't answer the question, I can direct you to who would be a good resource. I'm always here to help for that, as well as if you are thinking, and I've been talking to a lot of parents just who are questioning, I'm not sure if this is the right placement. I think especially coming in 9th grade, everyone's coming from, a lot of folks coming from different schools, or even in 10th grade, particularly in math, when you're looking at if they had geometry and now algebra 2 trig, and what does that mean, and why is he not doing so great right now? Well, to really think back to say geometry and algebra 2 are 2 very different concepts, and so there may be some struggle there just on that initial onset of the course, but I can help you find answers to that. In addition, now the boys are coming to my office. Sometimes I do have gummy bears or different things, so they'll come for that. But they'll also just check in, like, so are you still not going to consider giving me that study hall? You know, and it's just a conversation starter at this point because they know that the answer is no. But it's been wonderful. So I feel very blessed to be here. It's a wonderful community. I love working with your sons, and please do not hesitate to call me. My office is in the main office, and so you can come to the main desk, and I'm there, and calls or emails. But I know we'll take questions later. But thank you. And now
So I was hoping Brian would get here. He told me that he might, so I will try to talk about what my role is as the Dean of Students, and hopefully he'll come here. If he doesn't, I'll talk a little bit about how our jobs are delineated, if you will. So a little bit about me. I came in 1997. Mr. Slater hired me when he was doing this job, or was either principal. We met in Guatemala, so I was very fortunate to end up at this school like Mr. Slater. Although I was not a student here, this school is a huge part of my life. My wife and my kids are in my life because of this school. So she's not a teacher, but we met because of this place. Missy is my sister-in-law. Yes. She did.
What am I, chopped liver? Seriously.
Missy and Bob were both chaperones at that time in 1996 or 7. So anyway, that's all we'll go in there. And now Eddie's a senior here, her son, so very special place to me. So I have been here since 1997. I left in 2004 to help raise my kids. We'll keep that short story, but I was a stay-at-home dad, sort of, for about 7 years, and I was lucky enough to be called back here in 2011, in which case I started back in my master's and my K-12 principal licensure, which I'll be finishing here this December, thank God. So now I'm the Dean of Students, and it's been something that I've wanted to do for a really long time. And I couldn't be happier in my role because it is exactly what I thought it would be. I had a little bit of fear transitioning into Dean of Students because I had some success as a Spanish teacher, especially in the area of developing relationships. I really enjoy the interaction, whether it be through coaching, football, various other sports, or monitoring activities, and then teaching. So that is what keeps me in education. I was a Spanish teacher, but I wasn't on fire for second language learning. It was something I could do to work with boys, or in students, but in this case it ended up being boys. I've only taught at this school. And so moving into the Dean of Students role, I was really fearful that would lose those more intimate contacts. And actually what I'm finding is that I know more students this way than I would teaching. And that's because I really make it a point to be around, especially where there's a multitude of boys. I try to be very present and engaged in that activity, in that situation, and in the hallways and passing through. So I think I know more students at this point of the year than I probably did the entire year last year just by being around. So that's very encouraging. And so how does that affect the way I do my job? Well, my job is very student intense, if you can imagine. My job is to make sure that students are living the virtues and the values that we hold important based on our 4 pillars, based on the mission and the vision of our school, trying to hold those kids accountable to be better every single day. And kind of what I like to tell them is that you are okay where you are. You're not okay staying there. Today you have to get better. And when I have to interact with your son, for example, that is the way that I approach it. That this is whatever's happening right now, that's fine. Let's deal with it. Let's move on and get better tomorrow. So that, Bob mentioned it, Michelle mentioned it, relationships is what we do at this school. If I had to say, let's be honest, you're all paying for your sons to be here. There's no sense in avoiding that. what you pay for are the relationships that we build with your son. Your sons, for the most part, are driven, supported, relatively intelligent, or on their way to being there. And they will succeed based on some of the things that you do, based on their own character, some way or another. What we do, and I think the senior speech said it perfectly yesterday, Sam Enderby said it perfectly, we take what's inherent about you and we let it shine, and then we make it as good as it possibly can be. And I really believe that. To that end, we as an institution, I believe, especially with this administrative staff, not that in the past they didn't, but I really believe that there is true understanding and appreciation for the time, talent, and treasure that it requires for you to have your sons with us every day. And because of that, we spend a lot of time reflecting on how we can make the experience better. And it is a constant process, a loop, if you will, where we are trying to make sure that is the best it possibly. We have a stated goal of being the best all-male college prep school in the Midwest. We want to become a resource for any school that is like us to say, well, how are you educating boys? What are you doing? Because it is such a different job. When you, and Bob alluded to it, and Michelle alluded to it as well, when you have such a concentrated level of boy stuff without the dilution of female stuff, it is a really different environment, as you probably can understand. It's probably why you chose the school. So that makes it incumbent upon us to be as solid as we can in our pedagogy, which Bob alluded to, the way that we interact and teach boys, and that takes a lot of research. And I have a list of books. I think Missy, you are going to share it with the email or something like that. But some of the books that guide our instruction, our philosophies, Dr. Michael Thompson, Michael Gurian are some of the main writers. All these books are up here if you want to take a look at them. But so you can maybe get some stuff. These are very educational centered. So how do you treat boys? Michelle says this one has kind of a misleading name. It says The Trouble with Boys, but it's also a great book about boys. The Mind of Boys, The Wonder of Boys. So there's lots of stuff. Raising Cain, I would think, is probably my favorite. A Fine Young Man. All these books where you can take a look at. I also have a handout on some of the things that we try to do. 12 Suggestions for Teaching Boys, which comes from Michael Thompson, one of the authors of those books. So since Brian isn't showing up here, I'll kind of talk to you. So my job is very student-centered. I deal with, basically my day starts off with making sure your son got here. Not only on time, but we want to make sure that we know where kids are. If they're supposed to be here, we need to know that. If they're not here, we need to figure out where they're at. And so one of the main things I can ask you to do is, if for some reason your son isn't going to be here during a day or could be late, you should call the attendance line, or Mrs. Johns, Patty Johns, and she will have your son accounted for, which is a huge step to getting me on to the rest of my day, because we do need to account for all of our boys every single day and every single period. So we tie extracurricular eligibility to attendance. So every day, whether it's 10 seconds or 5 minutes late to class, they could be ineligible to participate in a co-curricular activity because of their lack of attendance or because they're tardy. And that's just something that we use as I would say a carrot, if you will, especially in those extracurriculars. As Bob said, it's one of the most important things that they do. It's an extension of the classroom, so we want to use that as much as we can as a motivational tool. So if you can motivate your sons to be here and on time, that would make our mornings go a lot easier, and at the end of the day as well. Brian's role as the upper school director, we work very intimately together, but Brian's role is more adult-centered, if you will, making sure that with Michelle, teachers are utilizing best practices, that they are, best practices said a lot, but we, like I said, we do a lot of reflection and study on how to best do that. And a lot of this has come up to the fore because of our new schedules. You can imagine your boys sitting in a classroom for an hour requires a different method of teaching. You cannot simply, as we are doing to you, stand up here and talk for an hour. Your boys cannot handle that. You are all motivated learners at this point. Some of your sons are not so, and so we have to change up, and that takes a lot of, it's hard to transition sometimes unmotivated males into learning activities. And so it takes a lot of training, a lot of professional development, as Michelle alluded to. So Brian is kind of in charge or takes the lead on making sure that we are up to speed on everything that we do in the classroom, and making sure that your sons are learning at the best they possibly can learn. I have a lot to say about all that stuff, and I think it's probably best if I just stop talking and let people ask questions, because I have a feeling there's probably some. I do have I did bring a handout of the 12 suggestions that we have for educating boys. Now, I will say that depending on the teacher, I'm just going to split up in half here. Depending on the teacher your son has, we are all on a continuum of achieving this level of boy education. Not every teacher does everything that's in here, but as a school, as an entity, our philosophy is to be moving towards these issues. And I give it to you, though it's a very educational type of thing, there's actually some good things in here about educating boys, parenting boys, that may help you understand what's going on. Number 11 is probably one you are all have an affinity for. Boys love technology. And I will say, as a father of an 11-year-old daughter, almost 12-year-old daughter, the same holds true for girls. They just interact with it in a way, in a much different manner, right? In my experience, girls are much more socially engaged with it. Boys are much more internal gaming and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of information on this. I love this. I've shared this with, Michelle and I were at the same conference last year where the author of the book, Dr. Michael Thompson, actually spoke. He actually used St. Thomas as a lot of his examples, because Mr. Jerkovich and I were sitting in the front row, and he kind of found us. It was kind of a fun session, because we were the only all-boys school in the whole.
I was still with visitation. We sat back in the back, and
Yeah.
we were chuckling every time they picked on. I mean,
Yeah.
they really did. Oh, you're from an all-boys school, and so they would.
Yeah.
They were the example of that entire conference.
Yeah. So this is one of the documents that came from that. You can find it online as well. But it's good stuff, and can kind of give you some insights as to what we're trying to move toward. Like I said, we are all on a continuum of going there, and not one teacher. We don't mandate that teachers do exactly the same thing. That's one of the great things about this school, is that we kind of let teachers to a degree be who they are. But that's kind of something that we are moving to.
I could just say with that, and Brian and I work together on forming some of the professional development opportunities and looking at the curricular program, and with that, the communication skills for your sons, I mean, those are critical, those are essential, and so the reading, writing, listening, speaking skills, whether we are building that through the military leadership curriculum, the public speaking, parts of that, the senior speech that the boys prepare and deliver within each class, all of those communication skills are front and center in all disciplines, because they are so important. And with the professional development for staff, we have a joint professional development opportunity coming up over MEA with visitation. Barbara Beachley is a consultant that works with independent school management. She is nationally recognized as well as locally. She most recently worked with SPA when they went through their schedule change. She is coming to work with our teachers from both schools all day on just how to best ensure that you are teaching in the 60-minute block to keep that high level of engagement going, so that it's not just an extended, you're still doing the same lesson within 40 minutes and giving 20 minutes of independent work time, really making sure that there's that new learning, that freshness, that engagement with the boys. And so that's what all of the faculty will be doing over at MEA, and we have a survey that went out to our teachers that really asks for their feedback on what's going well here, what are the concerns, so that she will utilize all of that feedback to inform the professional development session on MEA. So we're looking forward to that. But that's just an example of the types of professional development opportunities for the teachers. Just again, tying back to student-centered, what's best for your boys? What can we do to make sure we're providing the best environment and product?
Q&A? Ms. Johnson's ready to go.
Right, and I want to, this is really a unique opportunity. We have 3 administrators here that are giving us an hour of their time, and we're hearing all the stuff that they're doing. I really want to encourage you, if you even have a hesitation, do I want to ask it, because you might never get this kind of intimate chance again. So, and if we need to shut the cameras off, you know, I mean, I don't know if we are we allowed to do that.
I am very open, as I don't have any problem talking about anything. So, I'll leave it at that. Oh, I can talk about Guatemala for the next 45 minutes, hours, whatever.
So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, address it to whichever administrator, and maybe they'll all end up commenting on some of it. So I thought there was one hand already.
I'm gonna-
Okay, all right.
Yes?
Okay, well, it kind of goes with your question, but are you gonna also survey the boys about it? You know, I actually had an opportunity to be walking with my son, and so we had a great in-depth conversation. And he definitely feels there's some classes that are good for the whole 60 minutes, but there are some classes that are probably better suited to the 45. And I'm wondering, you know, I know this is in flex, and even last year they were talking about that there are some classes that really don't lend to this every 3 days or whatever, and so maybe surveying the boys for
Yep.
what they would like to see. I mean, I'm glad you asked for this,
Sure.
for MEA, you know, but maybe the upper school kids just like, okay, so you have, what would you like to see in some of those classes?
Yeah, we started with, during that first full advisory, they had the opportunity to share, but that was initial thoughts, and so that's a great idea to go back and survey them. We're at mid-quarter already now, if you can believe it, and then between now and the end of the quarter, to survey them, just to see exactly how are they feeling. It's another part of their advisory coming up and utilizing that time, but to do some, like SurveyMonkey, electronic
Or
SurveyMonkey
just
nice too.
suggestions, you
Yeah.
know, in those classes. I mean,
Yeah.
and maybe they don't have any, but maybe they do.
Grab
We-
a pilot
That's a great
group
idea.
of like
Yeah.
a pilot group of kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one factor I always think about is the change factor.
Yeah.
We don't like change period. I was part of the transition when Woodbury went back to block to traditional, and myself and my colleague went in and spoke, and those teachers, they did not want to go back to traditional. They loved their block, and a big part of that was change. They had not bought into the change as a community yet, and so there was a lot of resistance. So I wonder how that factors in your opinion here.
Well, you know, so as far as some of the classes that lend themselves better to 45 minutes, and you probably don't want to hear this, but the fact is that we are all in transition, and there are teachers here who have a lot of experience teaching, and they use the catalog of their experience to address how they interact on a daily basis. If their catalog is 20 years of 45 minutes, it's going to take them a while to transition to that 1 hour block. And so I already know the answer to what those kids would want. They want to move, they want to do group work, they want to be able to express their learning in other ways than tests and Scantron sheets. They want to be more active. That all takes time for teachers to figure out all the different ways that they can. I mean, we're in the halfway of the first quarter of the new schedule, first year of the new schedule. And none of those are excuses because your son is getting educational experience. That being said, everyone is in transition, right? And our professional development last year and this year was all about how do you fill 60 minutes of quality, engaging lessons. That doesn't mean that we will not ask. It's asking students what they want is a fantastic idea. And we need to do it more. As a teacher, I would do a survey of what their experience was like in my classroom. Just read back. And it was not easy to read or listen to. You know, especially when you think you're really good. And you find out that this kid's sitting right in front of you who you spend a ton of energy on thinks you're not so good. That's hard to listen to.
Well, and we are already gathering feedback on, and we will continue on the electives, and so what can we do how are the electives working? One class out of 3, that may work really well for a ceramics class, but maybe not as well for the psychology class. So what could we do? Or we noticed really quickly that we have a lack of electives, especially at the junior and senior level during 6th and 7th period. And so what can we do to make sure for next year as we're going through this cycle that there are more opportunities built in, and what can we do for just, and this maybe is too technical, but if someone wants to switch out of AP World History into a regular World History, do we have those courses scheduled during the same hour so that it's an easy change, so that I don't have to go back to a student and say, well, sure, I can switch you, but these other 3 classes are changing too, and so how much do these other 3, you have to weigh it. Now, some of that's great, that responsibility, and really having the boys reflect and say, okay, how much does this mean to me? Can I stick it out? Is this, because a lot of times they're invested in those other classes and they don't want to make the change then. But those are all good suggestions of things that we'll continue to talk to the boys about and find ways to get their feedback. The planner's another piece of how are you using the planner? Do you like how the planner is? What could be more useful? Would you prefer an online type version of a planner? So,
How about some more questions?
So if you could,
Can I respond to that as just a little bit different voice?
Absolutely.
And that is, a schedule change has been examined by St. Thomas in Visitation going back to the late 1970s. A variation of it, and Mr. Giroux has been around as long as I have, so he might want to jump in here too. Part of that schedule change that St. Thomas is limited, and I'm saying this as parents, you should feel comfortable challenging people. Challenging me, challenging other administrators, challenging teachers, because we throw out a lot of cliches to you. One of the things that hamstrings us here is that we have to work in cooperation with Biz. And I say we have to, not as a bad term, that's is a positive way. There's many things that we offer each other, but that becomes very hard to manage when you have to operate a system with another completely independent school, right? And there are some research aspects to educating boys and educating girls that are very different and are in conflict. And so as we struggle through this new schedule, which people have wanted for 30 years or more, there's a lot of good arguments for it. There's still some tweaks that have to be worked out. You know, there's a really strong body of evidence that says your son should have a skinny class of math, science, and language every day, and not a big hour-long class every 3 days. But you as parents have to start to try to understand the dynamics too of what's best for your son, and be vocal about it, and really call those two. And light up.
You will slow, call me, keep me.
By the way, every one of your sons should be starting on the varsity team. If they're not, you should call him. Do not go to the coach or his position coach. Right there. Don't let Julie stop either.
We have about 5-6 minutes, and we're going to end on 9 in respect to time. Let's hit some. I saw 2 here. Go ahead.
Okay, actually, thank you for your time. What tools or suggestions do you have for students who maybe don't quite understand that concept that the staff is here for you, the facility, the administrators, they want you to succeed. They don't want to just pile homework on. You know, and again, the student who maybe, you know, we don't have the 50-year legacy here. I mean, I'm pretty certain, you know, other kids come in that way, but a lot of that is, you know, they come in with all this history. So you've got students that come in that don't have that history. So how does St. Thomas engage those students to get them to realize we're here for you? And I know we've had this conversation.
Yeah. First off, I wouldn't assume that a lot of people have that history. Some people do, but don't feel like you're alone because you're new to the school. There's a lot of new families at this school. So, you know, I'll answer briefly. Self-education is one of the things that I push a lot. I push it with my own kids. I do. It's somewhat influenced by my self-preservation of energy. Some would call that laziness. But I don't do anything for my kids. I literally give them a space and a time to do what they need to get done. But as far as homework goes, they have got to figure it out. And that, I think, is the first step into them figuring out, like, my daughter wanted to put something in columns last night in Word. Like, I could have done it in a second. because I know right where the button is, but I made her do it. She wanted to quit, she wanted to stop, but she, I'm like, you gotta do it, you've got to figure this out. That leads to a mentality of self-advocation where they stick up for themselves, they go seek answers. One of the things that we have at this school are highly supported students. Their families are educated, but I will say this with all sensitivity in the world. Some of our kids, because their lives are relatively okay, they have a hard time digging in and fighting for things. Now, I don't mean to say that because we are an affluent community that our sons don't suffer some things. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But we do push kids to dig in and find some answers on their own. And that, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but giving an excuse such as, well, I don't have that many friends here, I don't know many people here, it's just not acceptable. If you are here, you need to find the answers that you need. We will help you, we'll give you the direction to do that, but you really have got to, and I think a lot of us, at least at the administration, Bob will tell a student if he comes to him about, I joked about that, but if a kid comes to him because he's not playing, he will send him right to the position coach. Then the position coach doesn't give her an answer, then you go to the head coach. And then there's a process, and that is all about advocating for yourself and being a voice for yourself. I'm sure you probably have a lot more to say about that than I do, but.
Well, no, and then I look at them like they're the Labrador puppy, right? But I want to give the boys, they'll come to my office, and that's true, the self-advocacy skills, but they also need to know that there's the adults and to go to. So which adult do they feel most comfortable with? Could be a teacher, a coach, one of us. Really encourage their advisor, encouraging your son to go first to that go-to adult. So it may not be the class that he's struggling in, or it may not be the area that he needs help, but if he feels comfortable approaching an adult, go to that adult he can talk that through with, so that we can, I'll spend a lot of time with boys just really counseling them on what they need to do to advocate for themselves in a class. And Mrs. Karen Rasmussen, Mrs. Schultz, the learning specialist, the counselors, they do that too, where we'll really sit down with the boys and here's what you need to do, and help them develop a plan, at least initially, until they get comfortable to do that themselves. And so that's another piece, is just really encouraging him to seek out a person who can kind of walk them through some of that initially, and then hopefully they start to do it on their own.
Once it goes back to relations.
Yeah.
Your son has to be an equal part of that too, right? We can't just go and try to cultivate relationships with kids who are unwilling. So and it takes work, but they have to find an adult that they think they have a relationship with, and then they got to try to pursue that a little bit.
I know that you can grow up.
Well, I just want to say, I
Oh,
love
sorry.
you guys like all balance each other out so
Yeah.
fabulously.
Yeah,
Like,
you
it's
really
really neat to see because you each bring such different things to the table. It's really fun. I mean, there's crossover well.
Thank you. Thank you.
But it's nice to see as a mom coming in the door, like, I just want to say that sometimes, like, when you drop off kids at school, it's really nice to see, like, how present you guys always are. Like, even in different volunteer things. Like, I remember one time I was in the cafeteria and I loved your approach because you're like, really? Because some kid was doing something and they're all right there like, oh boy, he's on it. But it's nice to see, like, our kids have so many different eyes. Like, if you want eyes for academics, if you want eyes for discipline, if you want eyes in sports, it's nice to see the presence, like, so I think, like, for different kids, you're around, so just reaching out and things like that is cool.
I appreciate the feedback, because I think it's a really intentional act on all of our, is to be as present as we possibly can, so I appreciate that feedback.
How do you demonstrate to the boys, you want them to come and talk to you about things? How do you let them feel comfortable that they can trust you? If they tell you something about one of your peers, and they don't know quite how to handle it, or they might disagree about something with them, how can they feel like, Mr. Rome's not going to run and tell so-and-so what I said, or how do you show them that they have that trust?
Yeah. So I'm assuming that all of us have an answer to that, and Bob did this job at the school at a high level for a lot of years, and I'm sure he's got a lot of answers to that question. I'd actually defer to you in this.
Well, I think there's two parts of the answer.
The reason I defer to him is because my answer would probably be very similar.
The first part is, when I talk to your son, if I need to tell somebody else, and Missy can probably talk to you for 2 days about mandatory reporting laws and things like that, so if I think your child is a danger to himself or others, I have a mandatory obligation to tell other people, specifically law enforcement. I have to tell them that. That's building trust between us. If I'm worried about somebody at your house, okay, John, I gotta tell your mom about this. I'll help you, I'll walk with you, but I gotta tell your mom about this. You gotta be honest with the kids about that stuff. Apart from that concern, how are you gonna act on it? It's one thing to listen to somebody spill their guts, and especially for a boy, that's hard to do. But how am I gonna go act on it? Am I going to make it a public declaration? Whoever did this to John Smith, I'm gonna, have you for detention for a month of Saturdays? Or am I gonna discreetly and professionally go talk to classroom teachers, counselors, parents, friends? All of us have an intuitive sense of how to solve these problems with boys. Michelle is going to have a different intuitive response to something than I am. It's not better or worse, it's just different. But in the community of educators we work with, we seem to find that balance of where do we get the truth. And that's kind of the beauty of St. Thomas. We don't fill out forms, we don't send it to a central office. Michelle, I gotta talk to you. All right. Joe Smith, what do you know about him? I'm a little concerned about this. It's a variety of conversations, and then I come back to your son. And with boys, that is so important to come back and for me face to face. Here's what I found out, here's what I'm gonna do, here's how I'm gonna move forward. Initial talk, I gotta do my job, then I come back, and it's really important for boys that I come back and talk to them face to face.
So Bob, if I come to you and I can't stand there at home as a football coach, I shouldn't pass, he's not fair, I'm not getting played.
Right.
And I'm sharing this with you, but the last thing is I want my coach to know I said
Right.
this. I think what you're asking is, because I agree with everything you said, I know that happens here. Do you talk to that young man through like, okay, what's going on, what makes you think that, and then redirect him to Mr. Rome?
I have to decide how Eric has to hear that information.
Right.
And I share with that young man that at some point, Mr. Rome has to know this. I can tell him, you can tell him, we can tell him, but at some point, this can't be a
What if it's just
secret.
hinting? Like-
Then he has to tell me that.
Okay,
Mr. Slater, I don't want this to be a big deal, I just gotta get it off my chest. I said, that's cool,
okay.
all right, door is shut, if you wanna, and we use other words sometimes with males.
Because I think confidentiality in a small environment is hard.
And I think another level, I think I would only add this to that level, is that let's say it's between student and student, and you need to address it. Depending on what it is. Privacy is such a huge thing, right? And so if I'm encouraging your son to talk to somebody with whom he has a problem, we're gonna first figure out, is this a possibility? Do you want to have this conversation? If not, then I need to, as a professional, figure out a way to address this issue in a kind of a backdoor way. And I don't know how that conversation would go, and I'll tell you this, I've had several already this year.
Boys want resolution, but they don't necessarily want confrontation.
Very good. Yes. So everything he said is exactly what I would have said. Let's just play it out. I would never go to your son and say, or I'd never go to someone with whom your son had, I'm just going to use John as an example. I would never say, Bill, John told me you did this. What are you doing? That is not okay. That is not the way that we do things. I mean, I have some information on students right now that I'm trying to artfully figure out how I'm going to address it with them. Because I've heard it from sources that I don't fully trust, but it's enough evidence for me to at least say, there's something going on here, and I just want you to know that this is what people are observing, and if there's some truth to what I'm observing, you probably need to change course. And they'll go, oh, okay, or they'll, you know what I mean? Like, how would you ever know that? Or they'll be like, you know what I mean? It's each situation is so unique, and it just takes, I think, when we've all said it, relationships, you need to understand who you're talking to. And if you don't know who you're talking to, you need to figure it out.
And I don't know if Eric agrees. When I was in a different role, I don't ever want to put a kid in a position where he has to narc on
Yeah.
somebody else. You never want to put a kid in that spot. You got to get information in other ways.
Yep. Yep.
You never put a kid in the corner having to do that.
Never.
And if it's about teachers, it's important that they can voice that information, and I can work with them or whomever they would go to say, if this is an issue between you and the teacher, and it's impacting your learning, and you are unable to really succeed in this class, so I'll coach them, or we'll work with a team to coach them on how to work with that teacher to make sure that they're getting what they need. But it's important for me to hear whether it's feedback from parents, feedback from students, as I'm working, and Mr. Edel, as we're working with teachers on how effective they are in the classroom. It's important to have that constructive feedback, and it's important to have teachers, challenge teachers, not in a demeaning way, but in a way that they really need to be reflective upon their own practice and what's happening within the classroom. And sometimes, you're not going to jive with every teacher, and every student's not going to connect in the same way with every teacher. That's not realistic, but it is important that we have open communication, and we are aware of the struggles within those classrooms, and we look for patterns and themes, and we work with teachers accordingly on that too. So as far as the classroom piece or the teacher piece is concerned, it's individualized too, but we wouldn't just say, oh, the student told me this, and go right to that teacher unless we worked out a plan with that student.
Want to be respectful of your time. It's 9:06. There's students out there that need to be.
Well, they're already in their second block now. I've got no text messages telling me that I need to act on something, so I can remain for a few minutes.
Let's just take one more, and then
Okay.
we're gonna wrap it up.
My son's so much a question, but for like the moms who are new, my son's a new 8th grader here, and he's gone to several schools, several private schools. We've bounced around a lot. And all I can say is you have to trust. It's hard. It's hard to come into a new school and not know their system, but we have zero history with St. Thomas. Like, we picked it for totally different reasons. And my son's ran into each of these problems in the last month. So all I did as a mom is I went to him and said, we gotta believe in the program. If you don't buy in, I can't buy in. And I buy in. So what do? I went to the only person we knew, our admissions director, Mr. Penny, and said, Chase is having this problem. It has absolutely nothing to do with your situation. What do? And they coached him on where to go. When he has a struggle at home, it's so hard for me to not step in and go, I'm going to fix this for you, and to go, we have to trust in the program. We went to who it needed to be done. You know where to start. We went to Mr. Penny. He went to whoever else, and the problems resolved itself, both academically and socially. They communicate with me when needed, but by buying into the program and going, we're going to just buy in and do it. We're going to attend the things. I came today. I know none of you. You have to buy in, and at some point you have to be the example. I told him, I made it very clear, I'm going to mom's meeting today. You're going to football whether you didn't get to play a minute or not. You don't like English, but guess what? We're reading The Hobbit. So you have to buy in, and whether I agree with it or not, it's like magic. I drop him off, he's angry, he's upset, the next day he comes back, or 2 days later, he's like, that's good. I'm like, how's the situation with so-and-so? We're cool. I don't know what they do behind closed doors, but if you buy in and you support what they need, and I asked Mr. Kenny, what do you need? He's like, go home, go about your day. We'll let you know if we need anything. For a mom, that's hard to buy into and hard to go with, but it's worked out so far.
Thank you. I think we got a unique experience here this morning. I want to really thank all three of you.
Thank you.
So much for giving us your time. Some of it's taped, so a lot more moms and dads will get a chance to look at it. If you moms and you wonderful administrators, 3 roses now. Not a 3 roses.
That was a quick evolution.
We have a lot of resources and a lot of energy to make some really good speaker series and some really good stuff for the moms and the parents here. Please let me know if there's things you want, things to be talked about, speakers we want to have come in. We've got a lot of connections with a lot of people, and we'll try to make it happen, and I know you guys will.
For sure.
All right, thank you very much.